All right, welcome back, family, to another discussion. I'm Remsen Noire, head coach at Tribe by Noire, and I want to talk about the belief that you either have to overeat to gain muscle, or you got to undereat or eat in a deficit in order to lose body fat. People really believe that you have to either do one or the other. And so what I want to do is I want to disprove that myth, and I want to give you the three main keys on how to substantially do both at the same time. Alright, so I need to explain the vicious cycle of bulking and cutting. So as far as calories go, there are three different types of phases. You have your cutting phase, your maintenance phase, and your bulking phase. This is typically what people do in the fitness world, right? When trying to lose body fat and gain muscle. So now your cutting phase is where you eat at a deficit. This is where you eat below your calorie requirement, right? Your maintenance phase is however much you need to eat in order to stay at your current weight. And then the bulking is where you eat in a calorie surplus, right? You eat over your maintenance calories in order to gain weight, gain muscle weight, right? That's the goal anyways. And the reason why this is such a vicious cycle is because let's say you're fat, or at least chubby, and you're trying to drop some body fat, maybe a significant amount of body fat. So you go into a caloric deficit to do that. Now, what happens here is you're very neurotic about your food. You really don't want to overeat. So what happens is you end up under-eating. Maybe you feel tired, sluggish, right? And it's really hard to stick to it. So either you quit before you get the results you want, or you get the results you want and you drop the weight, but you also really don't gain any muscle. So whereas your clothing sizes drop, you really don't necessarily look much better, right? You don't develop an athletic body by doing this. You really just look like there's just less of you, right? Now, the bulking is where people get overzealous about how much they eat. They want to pack on some big muscle. They got to eat some big meals, eat some big calories, right? And so people get overzealous about it and they start packing in the food, and in the process, they gain a lot of weight. I've seen guys where within a month they gain like 10 pounds and only like 1 pound of muscle and 9 pounds of fat and water weight. So whereas they may look more swole and lumpy, they also look soft, right? A little chubby, gained a little bit too much weight, because 10 pounds is a lot of weight, especially when it's not lean mass. So they see this and they go, okay, all right, now it's time to cut, so that 1 pound of muscle actually shows. So then they go into that neurotic calorie deficit. And in turn, they lose the water weight, they lose the muscle, but they also lose, well, they lose the fat, but they also lose some of the muscle. So if you gain like a pound of muscle, in this process you end up losing maybe a half a pound of muscle, if not all of it entirely. And that's why I call it the vicious cycle, bouncing back and forth from one end of the spectrum to the other. So there has to be some kind of middle ground. That middle ground would be the maintenance calories, right? But it goes a little bit deeper than calories. And so what I need to do moving forward is we need to talk about what calories actually are. What are calories really? Well, what most people don't realize is that a calorie is actually not a physical thing that you consume, right? It's not a physical form of nutrients. What it actually is it's a measure of thermal energy. To be specific, a calorie actually is a measurement of how much energy it takes to warm up 1 gram of water through 1 degree Celsius. It's actually what the technical term or the technical definition of a calorie is. It's a measure of energy. So knowing that, really, the amount of calories you eat is really just a measure of how much potential energy you have to use, right? So calories work like how gas works in your car. That liquid substance is potential energy. And when enough energy is put into heating it up, it becomes a gaseous form that is combustible to use to actually propel your vehicle. That's actually how that works. So it works the same way the human body does. So in knowing that information, it's pretty safe to say that the only reason for increasing your calorie intake is to have more potential energy. So in terms of calories, when you're eating, think about how much energy it actually takes for you to function well throughout your days. So the next thing is, well, how do you determine how many calories you're really supposed to be eating? And this is where calories and the whole idea of levels of calorie consumption fall flat on its face. Because I've had clients who they've always been in a calorie deficit, right? Or they go into a calorie deficit to lose weight and they still don't lose any weight, even when doing an hour of cardio every single day. So if you're in a calorie deficit and you're doing more exercise to burn more calories, well then why aren't they losing weight? In order to really explain that, you really got to understand macronutrients and micronutrients, right? And the roles these things play in the body. And the interesting thing is, I've had clients gain muscle and lose weight by increasing their calorie intake. But it's not just a general increase in calories, but it's where the calories come from. Alright, so having established what a calorie is and what the function of calories are in the body, let's talk about how the idea of a caloric deficit and a caloric surplus fall flat on their face. So, you have two people on both ends of the spectrum. You got the one person where they've always been in a caloric deficit, or they've been for maybe the past few weeks or past few months, and they do an hour of cardio a day and still lose no weight. Then you got the person who's the skinny guy, where they're in the gym lifting weights and they're eating like 3 times their weight in food, still gain no muscle. If anything, they just gain some body fat. So if that's the case, well, if you gotta eat big in order to get big, or if you gotta go into a calorie deficit in order to lose weight, well then why isn't that working for them? And the answer to that is, a calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. Meaning, not all calories were created equal. So, in regards to nutrition, you gotta chase nutrient density, right? Not caloric dense foods, but nutrient dense foods. Now a good example of that would be cake. Calorie dense, not nutrient dense. Fruit, nutrient dense, not calorie dense. Completely opposite ends of the spectrum here. See, but the thing is that there's nothing in cake that builds muscle, right? Because you need protein in order to build muscle. You need glucose in order to build muscle. And whereas cake has glucose, it has too much of it. And so what happens is that when you eat that cake, you have a much higher chance of glucose being deposited into fat cells. And this is how you gain unnecessary weight that you don't want, right? That's how that works. Cake doesn't have fiber, really doesn't have enough fiber in order to regulate the release of glucose into your bloodstream, right? And this is where people get the obesity and the diabetes and all of that, etc. So eating the cake, even though it's high in calories, it's not going to help you build any more muscle. In fact, it'll even slow down the process of building muscle because it'll jack up your digestive tract. And the key to actually burning fat and building muscle is digestion. So let's take a look at the fruit. Not many calories, but you're getting your bang for your buck, right? You're getting that fiber that you need to act as that regulatory process in the body, right? Because what fiber does is fiber regulates the sugar levels, right? Your blood sugar levels. It acts as a time release so that all the glucose, all the sugar that you consume, it doesn't just get dumped on the body and rushed into the bloodstream. And your body's just like, oh my God, just push it into your fat cells. Slows it down, right? To prevent that traffic jam of glucose on the body. And then you have your vitamin C, all your antioxidants and your vitamins, your minerals and all of that type of stuff, right? That boost and are conducive to healthy brain function. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of it because this video will be an hour long if I were to do that. But all that stuff makes sure that your brain is functioning properly and make sure your digestive tract is functioning properly. It's very important because in order to actually absorb the protein that you consume within your foods, you need that fiber, you need the vitamins, you need the minerals, you need the nutrient-dense foods. So you can actually gain more muscle on a diet with less calories. And that's a very good example of how that works. All right, so let's get into those 3 keys I was telling you about. Starting with nitrogen balance. So when you want to gain muscle, you have to go into what's called a nitrogen surplus. Now, nitrogen is the compound found in all living tissue. It's actually what builds living tissue. This is what we call protein. Now, when you ingest protein, it gets broken down in the digestive system and becomes amino acids. These amino acids then bond with muscle tissue and repair them to grow thicker and stronger. This is actually how you gain muscle mass, right? So now, in order to get into a protein or a nitrogen surplus, you're gonna have the right amount. Due to the science, right, and the studies, this is not bro science, but actual verified science, peer-reviewed studies, right? And the answer to this is you would want to consume in between 1.5 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to find out how much body fat and how much lean mass you're actually carrying. And from that, you'd be able to figure out how much protein you need in your diet. So it's not how many calories you need, it's how many grams of protein that you need. All right, so number 2, time efficiency and training intensity. Got to put the 2 together. So before I move forward with this, I got to explain the anabolic state and the catabolic state. Both are necessary. The catabolic state is the breakdown, the wear and tear of the muscle during the training. And the anabolic state is the recovery, the rebuilding of the muscle to make it thicker and stronger, right? Better, more improved. So when your training lasts too long, this perpetuates the catabolic state unnecessarily. This puts you behind the 8 ball because now you're breaking down too much, which makes it harder to gain muscle. So when you're time efficient, you're training at your highest performance level without going through unnecessary protein breakdown. This is going to help you a lot as far as that nitrogen surplus, because what you don't want to do is go into a nitrogen deficit. All right, so last but not least, number 3, recovery. Now, recovery is where the magic happens. Recovery is where you burn the most body fat and grow the most muscle. Now understand, recovery, yes, you need to sleep, right? You need to get plenty of sleep and reduce as much stress as possible. But it's not just sleeping, it's also eating for recovery, right? Because a big part of recovery is digestion. So when you're eating foods that aren't very good at digesting in the body, this creates stress and it hinders recovery. If you're overeating, that means that your digestive process is a lot longer, which means more work and more stress on the body, which also impedes recovery. So you want your diet to be high in nutrients and easy to digest, and you want to get plenty of rest. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up, you guys. You know what to do. Subscribe, like the video if you like the video. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. Let me know if any of this information helps you, or if you want any more information, you have questions on this subject, you disagree at all with anything that I've said, leave it down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time.